Welcome into Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery here on Locked on Sports Atlanta. Today on the show, who plays opposite Ebiketie, make it make sense, and depth chart thoughts. It's all next. It's Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery, Locked on Sports Atlanta.
This is Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery, part of Locked on Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
Hittin Hard is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We ask you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Get the latest episodes of Hittin Hard as soon as they become available. Also, check us out on the SiriusXM app and give me a follow on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. So we know that Arnold Ebiketie is obviously going to be the starting outside linebacker for the Atlanta Falcons this year. And obviously, we're putting a lot of pressure on him to create a whole lot of sacks and put up some big numbers this year. But as I look at the depth chart that was just released by the Falcons leading into Friday night's game, preseason game number 1, I do have a question just about the idea of who's actually going to play opposite him. You know, again, a lot of times that these big-time pass rushers have to have a successful running mate to go along with them. You know, Myles Garrett had, Jadeveon Clowney plus a couple other guys. You know, again, we see guys that have those pieces along with them. And sometimes the pieces that are beside those guys or opposite those guys are not nearly as good. I mean, again, I remember Jared Allen, right? And that's how Ray Edwards got his big contract, right? He played opposite Jared Allen, who was one of the all-timers and just one of the more destructive forces in the NFL. And Ray Edwards got himself a big-time contract with the Falcons, piggybacking off of him. So a lot of times it doesn't work out, but you do typically want to have that running mate to go along with Ebiketie. So who's going to play opposite him? You know, again, is it Bud Dupree? Is it D'Angelo Malone? Is it Lorenzo Carter? You know, who's going to be that guy? You know, at times it'll probably be Michael Walker even sliding to the outside. You know, I think that their hope is that they have Bud Dupree be their starter going into week 1, and then maybe eventually that changes, whether it's Carter or something like that. You know, look, I'm not saying that there aren't some decent options to play opposite Ebiketie, but if some of these guys don't live up to their billing, then I don't know how good Ebiketie is going to be. If Bud Dupree can't get his career back on track, or Lorenzo Carter can't have an impact, or at some point, if it is a Zach Harrison or something like that, if those guys can't have some impact on what's going to happen opposite Ebiketie, then I do have my concerns because, again, they're going to try to take away Ebiketie pretty quickly. And again, Ebiketie is a nice player, but let's see if he can handle a bigger type of workload. You know, Calais Campbell could be a guy that slides a little bit outside. You know, and again, I'll put Adi Ogundeji just on the list, but there's no chance that he's really any kind of outside threat. So I think the idea is that Bud Dupree, who is listed first on the depth chart, but again, take the complete depth chart with a complete grain of salt. Like, don't buy too much into the depth chart. Again, we'll talk about that later on in the program. But take the depth chart with a grain of salt. But I do think that Bud Dupree, for right now, is probably the leader in the clubhouse. And he's a guy that we just talked about yesterday, right? That we haven't really talked a whole lot about Bud Dupree. We haven't really seen much of him. We haven't seen the highlight plays about, oh, Bud Dupree's back and he's healthier than ever and he's motivated and all this. And he's said the right things. Not saying that. I'm not saying that he's, you know, kind of not been, you know, part of the team and doing good things. But again, we just haven't seen kind of those wow plays or anything like that. Again, maybe by design. I don't know. But I just, you know, again, I look at a guy like Ebiketie, who's young, who's trying to get his way in. And again, there's a lot of pressure on an Ebiketie to come in and help us create a whole bunch of sacks. And look, again, if he's a 2-sack guy, 3-sack guy again, we're not going to get defensively to where we need to be, because there aren't going to be a whole lot of 8 or 9 sack guys. We can talk about some guys that get 3, 4, 5, 6 sacks, whatever like that. But unless you're going to tell me we got 10 of those guys, then I'm going to be a little bit concerned. And we've got to get to the quarterback this year. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about this. If this thing is going to turn around defensively and we're going to be a playoff caliber defense, you have to get to the quarterback, right? We've preached this over and over and over and over again. And it will necessitate at some point, whether that's next year, whether that's years down the road, but there is going to be a necessity to draft a first-round pass rusher again. Yes, getting back into that well. Again, I've talked about this. 70% of the top 10 current active sack leaders, current active sack leaders in the NFL are first-round picks. 70% of the top 20 current active sack leaders are first-round picks. 70% of the current active sack leaders in the top 25 are first-round picks. Those are all not coincidences. First-round guys are where you make your hay, and you develop those guys, and those are the impact players. So again, at some point, we're going to have to dip our toe back into that well and grab us a first-round pass rusher. But obviously for this year, we're relying on Ebiketie and hopefully Bud Dupree. Again, they'll have a myriad of rotation of guys to play this position. Hopefully Bud Dupree is a guy who can step his game up. Hopefully Lorenzo Carter's, I don't know. I don't even know what Lorenzo Carter is at this point. He played about 75% of the snaps last year, played a good bit. He did have some impact, but okay. Again, it wasn't necessarily even sacking the quarterback. He did make the big interception play and this, that, and the other. I mean, he did some good things. I'll give Lorenzo Carter credit for that. And I think that he's a nice rotational piece at this point, but I'm probably not as enamored if he's going to play another 75% of the snaps for this team this year. So again, we're getting back into the hopefuls, wishful thinkings. We need guys to step up and this, that, and the other. I certainly think that Michael Walker is a guy who's going to see some time at outside linebacker. He's listed on the depth chart as one of the inside linebackers, but I think he definitely could see some time at outside linebacker. And part of that is not even so much his pass rushing ability, but his pass coverage ability. He's been a very good pass coverage linebacker. He actually had 6 passes defended last year, which is a pretty good number for a linebacker who runs around and doesn't play particularly 95% of all the snaps and things like that. He is pretty good effectively, in the pass game. So again, he'll probably see some time. So there'll be a myriad of guys, but when it's time to go get the quarterback, when it's 3rd and 13 and we got to line up and we've got to go buzzsaw right at the quarterback, that's probably going to be a Bud Dupree for right now. And let's hope that, again, if he's a guy who he had 7 sacks over a 2-year period, and that's part of why the Titans released him, is just that he's not the same player that he was a few years ago when he was in Pittsburgh. He's peaked at 11.5 sacks. He's not that same kind of player anymore. Only 7 sacks in the last 2 years. So hopefully Bud Dupree is a guy that gives us some of that oomph off the edge. But if not, how effective can Ebiketie be just flying solo on his own? It's going to be interesting to see who's going to end up lining opposite of Arnold Ebiketie when all is said and done. Malone, Carter, Bud Dupree, Michael Walker. I think they're going to use a myriad of guys, in especially in a particular situation that they're going to get into defensively. But let's see, when it's 3rd and 13, who's going to come off that edge and go right after the quarterback. All right, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. As you know, FanDuel is America's #1 sports book, and there's no better way to bet on Major League Baseball, as we're actually just a few weeks away from playoff baseball, if you can believe it, than on FanDuel, where you can get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets, up to $200. That's right. You bet 20 bucks on FanDuel and you'll get $200 in bonus bets, whether you win or whether you lose. It's 200 bucks you can spend on betting on everything from money lines to the over-unders to who you think's going to hit the first home run. And obviously with FanDuel, it's a safe, secure, super easy to use app. And most importantly is when you win, you get paid instantly. No better place to bet on Major League Baseball than on America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. So head over right now to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON and get your $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON. FanDuel is the official partner of Major League Baseball. So I have to have this make sense. So there was a report, I guess it was yesterday or what have you, that Shams Charania put out on his Twitter page. And he talked about this in an article that he wrote for The Athletic. And here's what it says. So this is about the Atlanta Hawks making a move to go get Pascal Siakam. Okay, sounds pretty good. And, again, I know we've been in the market and this, that, and the other. Here's what Shams had to say. Atlanta, this is a quote, Atlanta has offered a package centered around DeAndre Hunter, AJ Griffin, and draft compensation to Toronto for Siakam, league sources say. But the Raptors are believed to have upped the price on any possible deal at each turn. Okay, and by the way, one of the other quotes that I saw about this story was the Raptors balked at the idea of trading Siakam for that package. I'd balk too. Like, I'm embarrassed for Landry Fields. You mean to tell me that we're looking at trying to land a multiple-time All-NBA player? He's been a second and third All-NBA player. He's a multiple-time All-Star. We're looking at getting rid of our trash in DeAndre Hunter, a nice young player, but obviously not at Siakam's level, and draft picks. Like, that's really what we offered to get him. Again, I'll go back to this question. Are we really serious about changing the direction of this roster? Well, you can't give up all kinds of picks. Wait a second. We're at a desperate point. At some point, we can't just sit back and say, well, we got Quinn Snyder and we'll just coach our way through it. Your coaching wasn't all the problem last year. Okay, I know a lot of y'all think that, well, Nate McMillan was the whole problem. No, he wasn't. No, Nate McMillan was not the whole problem. And here's the problem that we're really running into right now. As we sit here on August 9th, the year of our Lord 2023, this Hawks roster isn't better than what it was when we lost to the Celtics. Bottom line, we can spin it and talk about things and change and hopes and wishes and prayers and all. Right now, our roster is not better than it was when we lost to the Boston Celtics. And if we're going to make a play for a Siakam, you're going to have to give some things up. And look, at the end of the day, if I have Siakam, Trae Young, Dejounte Murray, and whatever, add a Capella or, some player into that mix, I'm going to have to roll the dice with those guys. Well, but he's a rental player. Okay, but you don't even make the trade. You don't even make the trade if you think that he's not going to sign a long-term deal. You have to make that offer knowing that he's going to sign a long-term deal. You have to argue from a position of strength, not just, well, let's give you our trash and then we'll give you DeAndre Hunter, who we don't want, and draft picks. Like, how does that make sense? Make it make sense that that's what we're offering to get a multiple-time All-NBA caliber player. Now, if we're not going to go after Jaylen Brown, then the next best guy that's available out there on the marketplace is Pascal Siakam. And again, I have my issues just as far as not the player, but again, that seems like an offer that you offer it hoping that the Raptors will take it, but you don't really want them to take it, right? Because again, he's going to be a max guy. He's not playing for less than a max contract. I promise you. And his brothers even made mention about that he's like, you think we're going to the Hawks or whatever? He's not playing for a dime less than max money. Whatever that number ends up being, he's playing for max money. So you better commit to the idea of adding another $120, $150 million worth of payroll to keep Pascal Siakam. So, I don't know that the Hawks are ready to do all of that. I'm not convinced or sold that they want to get in the luxury tax moving forward or have that kind of money tied up into guys. But if you're going to make an offer, let's make an offer. If you really think that Pascal Siakam is a difference maker and you plug him in here and we can go be one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference, if you really feel that way, then offer a package that's worthy. Not one of our trash players and some draft picks. Sorry. I mean, I'm not impressed by the deal that's being offered for Pascal Siakam. And maybe the Raptors will take less at the end of the day. I don't know. I know right now that they're again, the quote was they balked at the idea of trading Siakam. I'd balk too. I'd end up balking too. As far as if that's the compensation package you're going to give me, one of your trash players that you don't want, who you overpaid for, and some of your draft picks, and a nice young player who can shoot the basketball. But let's see if AJ Griffin is going to be second, third team All-NBA. No, I'm not doing that deal. I'll hang on to Siakam and try to re-sign him or what have you before I get into all of that. Are we really committed to doing what we have to do to change up the dynamic of this organization? Are we really committed to it? See, I don't get that sense. And you can spin to me all these narratives about this and that and whatever like that. Tony Ressler can tell me about how desperately they want to win and this, that, and the other and all this other falderall and good stuff. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced about what the direction of this team is. Here's what I do know. We're not better today than we have been in the past. If we grab Pascal Siakam, we're a better roster. And again, unless you tell me that we're going to sign him long-term, I wouldn't even make the deal unless I had a guarantee of that. So why even offer? Again, if you're offering a deal, you're thinking that he's going to be here long-term. But you're not just giving, again, I think the whole thing is a mess. When I read this trade, I was like, are we really serious about trying to make a difference on our franchise? Are we really committed and serious? Again, if you're just going to offer a trade for the sake of offering a trade, don't offer a trade. Don't offer anybody. Just stay out of the mix. It's okay if you don't want Siakam because of the money and different things like that that's going to be attached to him. I mean, seriously, if you're not going to commit to the financial aspect of him, then don't even get involved in the trade. I got no problem with that. But I would rather not insult the Raptors organization and have them laugh at us about the compensation package that we're offering than just stay out of the way. Stay out of the way. And maybe the Raptors aren't going to get what they want. But I look at this and again, I've got eyes. I can see we're giving away DeAndre Hunter because, I mean, probably part of it's the money aspect of it. But DeAndre Hunter and draft picks and an AJ Griffin, again, we were talking about 6 players for Jaylen Brown. I'm getting rid of my trash and one of my younger players and some draft picks. Who's going to fall? What GM's going to fall for that? What GM's going to look at that and say, well, that's a sweet deal for us? Make it make sense. Are we really committed to being better? Are we seriously committed to doing what we have to do as an organization to get better, to be a top tier team? If we're going to offer packages like that, no wonder the Raptors aren't going to bite on something like that. No wonder the Raptors are looking at like, yeah, no thanks. Make it make sense. Right now, we're not a better team than we were a few months ago. That's a fact. We're not better. And by the way, October 2nd or 3rd, whatever day training camp opens up, it'll be here before you know it. And we're going to roll this thing back out with the same guys and hope that, it's going to be better and all this, that, and the other. I don't have a lot of confidence right now in what the Atlanta Hawks are doing. Sorry. I mean, you can miss me with that whole narrative. All right, as you make Hittin' Hard your first listen, be sure to go into whatever podcast platform that you listen on and let us know that you're an everyday listener to the program. So we call them our everydayers, and we definitely thank you so much for being a part of our growing community. But let us know that you're an everyday listener, a 5-day-a-week listener into the program. So thoughts about the depth chart as the Atlanta Falcons just released their first depth chart of the new season as we head into week 1 of the preseason. Now, again, take this with a grain of salt. And obviously, this is partly about veterans getting the benefit of the doubt. Again, not what we're going to see over the course of the year and the percentage of snaps and things like that we're going to look at. But a couple of just interesting things that I thought about it, okay? So here's who the starters are on offense. You've got Mac Hollins and Drake London at wide receiver. You've got Jake Matthews, Matt Hennessy, Drew Dahlman, Chris Lindstrom, Caleb McGarry at our offensive line. Cordero Patterson is listed as our starting running back. Desmond Ridder, our starting quarterback. Keith Smith, our starting fullback. Jonnu Smith as a starting tight end. And Kyle Pitts at a starting tight end. All right, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 starters that we have on offense. See, there's one problem, though, is that we can only play 11 guys at one time. I like the idea. I would love to see the league get petitioned to let the Falcons play with 12 guys on offense, but I don't think that that's really going to happen. So, again, Keith Smith is going to be a guy who probably is making this team because of his special teams value. He's only played, by and large, 25% of the snaps over the last couple of years, and I wonder how much of a role there is for him in this offense. Again, we will see him in limited bursts and different things like that, but I think Arthur Smith is going to keep a fullback, on the roster and in the fold to have a fullback that's available to it. But again, we can see Parker Hesse and some of these guys line up as those H-backs and different things like that, or Keith Smith, split out wide, at some point or whatever like that as a decoy, whatever. But again, he's a guy that's only playing about 25% of the snaps. But again, he is playing about 1 out of every 4 snaps. So it is interesting just to see kind of what role Keith Smith will have. But at the end of the day, he's going to be a special teams player. That's going to be his calling card as to why ultimately he makes the roster. We can have guys that can do some of the other things that he does, but he's a good special teams player, and that's why he'll ultimately make the roster. Now, on the defensive side of the football, again, we talked about this in the first segment, that Arnold Ebiketie is listed as one starting outside linebacker, and Bud Dupree is the other outside linebacker. And Lorenzo Carter is his backup, where Adi Ogundeji is Ebiketie's backup, and D'Angelo Malone is third on the depth chart. And, I wonder about, like I said at the first segment, I wonder about how much competition there is for that starting outside linebacker spot. Is there a competition between Lorenzo Carter, who played a crap ton last year? Like I said, he played over 75% of the snaps last year for this team. I wonder how much of a competition there is at that outside linebacker spot opposite of Ebiketie. Or is Bud Dupree the go-to guy in all this? And I got no problem with that. I'm just curious from a standpoint of, again, we just talked about, they're going to do a myriad rotation of guys depending on the scheme and the scenario and situation. You know, they're going to play situational football. And again, remember, this is all positionless football, right? It's all positionless football. But when it comes time to get after the quarterback, I do think Dupree is going to be the guy. But we could see, again, even a Michael Walker play over there. But what I want more than anything, though, is a running mate for Arnold Ebiketie. I just want somebody who can do some good things and be a solid presence opposite of Ebiketie. Because if all of the focus is on Ebiketie, you know, again, and teams are going to go after him. If we don't have anybody viable on the opposite side, we're going to have some trouble. And not just the situational football of this guy in coverage. Yeah, I'm talking specifically about pass rush. Because, again, I will say the biggest fear I have is our pass rush. And that's the thing that I think holds us back when we look back at the season. It's, again, the reason that we have not won in 5 years isn't because, well, we've had salary cap issues or we've had these roster limitations or what have you. Teams go worst to first all the time. Teams are in cap purgatory all the time. Every team has got cap purgatory issues. The Saints have had cap purgatory issues for 15 years. Hey, even in the middle of Drew Brees' career, they had salary cap issues. It's not all that. We don't influence the game at the point of attack enough. We don't have enough good players at the positions that influence the game the most. That's been why we don't win. Not because of salary caps and roster building. My God, just the things that I hear anyway. But again, having that running mate to go along with him. Michael Walker's a guy who, again, he's listed behind Troy Anderson and Caden Ellis. Michael Walker's a guy who I think is going to play all over the field. So, again, he can play inside. He'll probably play a little bit of outside, especially when it comes pass coverage and things like that. But I'm going to be curious to see, just as the season moves along, what his role is going to be for this team. The other one is Jalen Hawkins, who's the backup to Jesse Bates. And I wonder how much of a competition there is for the other starting safety spot between Richie Grant and Jalen Hawkins. Is it a fait accompli that Richie Grant, who's done a lot of good things in camp this year, is just the de facto starter there? I would think. I mean, again, he's a second-round draft pick, and they've got a couple of years in him now. But Jalen Hawkins is a guy that I really like. And my buddy Jarvis Davis always talks about Jalen Hawkins, that when he was drafted, that he was a guy. And look, he was a ball hawk guy out of Cal, played a little bit reckless because he, again, he was getting penalties at Cal where he was going up and laying some lumber on some people. But I'd rather have that than a guy who's afraid. But again, is there a competition between Grant and Hawkins at the end of the day? I'm not so sure about all of that. And then Calais Campbell's listed as, along with David Onyemata and Grady Jarrett, that's going to be our line of scrimmage, our guys inside. I wonder if Campbell will play a little bit of a hybrid role where he is a little bit outside and this, that, and the other. And then the other thing is, the last thing is the idea of where Zach Harrison is in all of this. Right now, he's listed as third defensive line. He's obviously done a lot of good things in practice. But again, we know that rookies don't play a significant role in our team. And that's been true over the last couple of years. He's going to have to work himself into a rotation to probably find himself some snaps. But I look forward. He's one of the guys I'm going to look forward to seeing coming up here on Friday night. All right, well, thank you so much for making Hittin' Hard your first listen. Be sure to go in and leave us a comment on whatever podcast platform that you listen on, that you're an everyday listener to the program. Let us know that you're an everydayer, as we like to say. We thank you so much for being a part of our community. We ask you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. You can get the latest episodes of Hittin' Hard as soon as they become available. Also, check us out on the Sirius XM app and give me a follow on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. Back with you tomorrow. This has been Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery, Locked on Sports Atlanta.